Welcome everyone to our virtual Q&A session tonight. We really appreciate you joining us. My name is Amy Tiberio. I'm the Dean of Admission here at Roger Williams University, and I am joined by a very esteemed panel of my colleagues who are here tonight to answer any and all of your questions. I know that some of you who are attending have already decided to join us this fall, and others may still be in the deciding process. But we hope that you'll be members of our incredible Roger Williams community. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their roles here at the university. And then before we jump in with questions, I want to do a couple polls to get a sense of who's joining us this evening. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Allison Chase Padula, who's our Associate Dean for Student Success, and then we'll go around with some introductions.
Hello, everyone. As Amy said, my name is Allison Chase Fadula. I'm the Associate Dean for Student Success at the university. And in that role, I'm responsible for the academic support services that help our students do the very best they can, including our advising and peer mentorship program, our tutoring center, student accessibility services, as well as our student success and retention initiatives. Welcome to the panel tonight.
Thanks, Allison. And then we have Dr. Brian Williams, who is our Chief of Staff. Brian?
Yeah. Thanks, Amy, and good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Williams, and I serve in the Office of the President and want to really appreciate all of you taking the time out to be with us tonight for the panel and learning more about Roger. I have the privilege of kind of working with the admissions financial aid team, marketing and planning efforts for the university. And that last part of planning, the last couple months, has really been about fall planning and working with others on this panel and across the university, hundreds of faculty and staff that are planning what the fall looks like. So we're all real excited to help answer a lot of those questions for you. That what does it mean to join Roger Williams, and what is the fall going to look like? I'm sure those are a lot of questions we'll really try to get answered for you tonight, along with all your other questions. And I would just add as my introduction, this is the time and the opportunities that we're building for the fall really show what Roger Williams is all about. I'm really proud to work with a lot of people who work at a university of our size that's about personalization. It's about building faculty and student relationships. And that's hopefully what you saw in Roger Williams, to be looking at it as a place for you to join. And that community has been strong in person and remotely through this entire year and through this pandemic time, where we've been apart, but really been closer together as a community in a lot of ways than we really had been before. So we hope to share some of that and share some of those ideas about what the fall looks like, regardless of what the circumstances are, for the type of faculty that are going to care for you, the types of students and staff that are going to guide you along on the journey through the years ahead. So really thanks to be with you, and we're excited to share a lot of that detail with you as we go along.
Thanks, Brian. And then Dr. John King, who is our Vice President for Student Life.
Thank you, Amy. Good evening, prospective Hawks. Great to be on the call. I want to start off by acknowledging that your senior year of high school has just been train wrecked by this terrible virus. But we are going to move forward and make the best of this situation. And I really believe that any student entering college this year is going to end up being more resilient and more adaptive than any other group of college students that have come in the last 50 years. Been at the university for 16 years, and the areas in student life that my colleagues and I work hard on delivering a quality experience are residence life and dining, student programs and leadership, as well as orientation, counseling, health services, student conduct, public safety and transportation, and commuter life. We really stress making our decisions centered around what's best for students, what helps students thrive, to succeed, to live and to learn together in community. And this is a really dynamic and challenging time, but one I think we should embrace. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. And last but not least, Dr. Alan Hance, who is our Associate Provost for Community Engaged Learning.
Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be here as well, and My responsibilities are to work with faculty, students, and staff across the university, specifically looking at enhancing Roger Williams' commitment to engage teaching and learning, which is really one of the hallmarks, a core hallmark of the experience at Roger Williams. And I certainly want to echo my other colleagues' comments that the last few months in particular have shown how committed a community we have and how, as a university, we're creating a response to the current circumstances that are student-centered and really focused on innovating around how we teach and what kind of learning goes on. So I'm delighted to be here, welcome you to the call this evening, and look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Okay, wonderful. So I wanted to go over a few of the logistics before we jump into the Q&A. We're going to be using the Q&A feature that should be at the bottom of your screen and your Zoom screen for you to be able to type in any questions that you have for the panelists. If you type them in there, I will see those questions and I will pose them on your behalf. And so we'll try to get through as many and hopefully all of them this evening. We do have some questions that were submitted ahead of time, and I've got those ready to go as well. But before we jump in with that, I thought we would get just a sense of who's joining us tonight. So I am going to launch a poll, and hopefully everyone can see this. If you can let us know whether you are an admitted student, whether you are a parent or guardian of an admitted student, maybe the whole family is online together, or if you would classify yourself in some other role. We'd love to see who's with us. All right, it looks like we still some votes coming in. Just about half are the whole family is on board, so that's fantastic. And then we have a lot of parents and guardians who are on, and then a smaller population of just individual students. All right, wonderful. And so here's the results of the poll. Okay, and then I'm gonna bring up another one to find out where folks are in their process right now. So if you can let us know if you've already deposited or committed to Roger Williams, if you feel that you are very likely to commit, if you're still deciding where you will plan to commit this fall, or if you're still kind of unsure about what your college plans will be, or whether you'll be attending college this fall. All right. So it looks like we've got a lot of future Hawks with us this evening. Great, wonderful. Okay, great. Thanks for letting us know. That's really helpful. So we're going to get started with one of the top questions that we've been getting, this evening and really throughout the last several weeks, which is just to hear more about fall planning. Everyone is wondering, what is the fall semester going to look like? Will we be on campus? How are we going to handle things so that students are able to join us safely? And so the first question is, somebody's interested in what fall looks like for first-year students. Has a final decision been made that students can live on campus if they desire, or is that decision made by the state?
Dr. King, do you want to grab that?
Sure. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Amy. So yes, we are dedicated to reopening campus. We are working collaboratively with the state. Brian and I are on a call each Tuesday with the governor's office and other representatives from the higher education institutions in Rhode Island. And together we are crafting reopening templates, meeting the guidelines for the state and helping each other solve issues and problems and strategize. I mean, here at Roger Williams, we have a huge undertaking, both in academic planning, but also more specific about campus life, and that's called Reopening Roger. And in Reopening Roger, we have 125 students, faculty, and staff involved in 6 working groups. How to Learn, which is all about the classroom, both the delivery of curriculum and also the setup of classroom and safety procedures. How to Live, similarly talking about, during a pandemic, how do we live? How do we provide the safest environment possible? And how do we have to change and adapt to make that possible? How to Engage, which Dr. Hance mentioned, everything outside of the classroom. So your civic engagement, community engagement, athletics, clubs and activities, organizations, cultural events. How to Work is really employee focused. How do we deliver essential services during this time period? And then How to Respond for our public safety, our first responders, health services, testing and tracing, quarantine and isolation spots, and then our orientation and first year experience approach. So it's very comprehensive, lots of involvement. We are using students to test our ideas and having them involved in the solutions.
Great, thank you. If campus reopens, what will the cafeteria look like? Will there be social distancing and will there be food stations?
Yeah, so this is a Maslow's hierarchy of needs question. Food is always at the top of the list for college students. It will be different, but it'll be adaptive. So we will have to have less seating, just as in your towns and communities, there will be less seating in indoor restaurants. We will have to cut back on our density as well. We are envisioning different restaurant style themes in different parts of the Upper Commons, and we're also going to adapt and make more flexible our meal plan so that some of our retail locations will be accessible to residential students as part of their meal plan, not as extra, not as Hawks dollars, for certain hours during the day. And those hours will be pretty substantial. I think it'll be 11 to 11 and a half, possibly 12 hours of access. So we're going to think outside the box. We're mocking up our dining room and we'll have a menu. There will be a lot of takeout. So unlike typical, you will be able to take your meal out with you. That has not been the case in the past.
When you talk about being flexible with classes, how does this work? If some kids are home, but some are on campus, who's teaching the class? Would it be one teacher and some kids in the class and some at home? And will there be group projects?
I can start part of it, and then Allison does a lot of the student academic success work and can correct half of what I say and build on it. We're looking at a number of things with technology investments in our classrooms, as well as different course options right now. By the time you come to orientation in the summer and are actually picking classes, I think you're going to see a combination that meets exactly what you're asking. And then I'll add in one other facet of our thinking. I think this fall from Roger Williams, you're going to see in-person delivered courses, an expansion of online courses that you may not have seen in the same level in the past. So we may see residential students living at Roger Williams, but taking an online class, and a handful of in-person classes. So a remote student or a commuter student could manage a couple online classes and find some real flexibility with how we're thinking about the schedule. But it's also that blending that's really important for our planning for any students that are sick or show symptoms related to the pandemic as well. John will be able to talk. There's a number of questions in the Q&A about what if a student needs to isolate. We are thinking that any of our classes that are taught in person We're investing in technology to look at ways that any class that's delivered in person has a simulcasting type of an option, so that students who may need to, quote, miss coming to a class, being around other students for a week, monitoring their symptoms and temperature, the protocols and safety that we'll have in place, they won't miss class. And so there's a balance of thinking about simulcasting that will allow all of these options of a student being remote, a student needing to isolate, a student being in a classroom setting and rotating through those based on their health, based on the types of courses that they've registered for. So flexibility of our faculty in those models, there's a lot of professional development that our faculty are going under to think about teaching in these sort of hybrid ways. So it'll all be the same instructors for the most part. Of professor will be in front of a class and teaching, and they may have 10 students physically in front of them and 5 that are online. And that blending is something that is going to be really unique experience this fall as we kind of work our way through that phased reopening of the university. And Allison, if you want to add some to that from your perspective.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, just as John explained a little bit about the reopening of Roger committee work that's happening, there's also a group of committees that are working on the academic side on just these very issues. How do we offer classes that are flexible and also responsive to the needs of students given the unique situations of the health crisis and what individual students and families may need during that time. So we're working on a variety of different options that students might be able to choose from, and we'll have that ready for orientation so that students will be able to talk with an academic advisor and talk about what they're interested in doing for the fall, what they're going to be able to do for the fall, whether it's on campus or some blend of that. And we're also trying to build in some really exciting opportunities for engaged learning. As Dr. Hansen mentioned, that's really a hallmark of Roger Williams, and we're looking for ways to add that into the experience for first year students as well. So there'll be lots more to come on that. We're also looking at adjustments to the calendar that will allow us some flexibility in that. So I think, as Brian just mentioned, you'll be seeing more information to come on that, and I think it'll be an exciting time for us as we move forward for the semester, realizing that we very much want to be together and we'll have to adapt as time goes on, but our primary focus is making sure that we're delivering the best education that we can for our students during this time.
Thanks, Allison. And that's a great segue to the next question, which is how will Roger Williams be able to still deliver a hands-on education that's connected with the community if the semester is handled in a more hybrid way and some students may prefer to learn remotely?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to begin on that question. So as Dean Chase-Padula was saying, there are a number of us working on committees with faculty, students, community partners to think about, you know, how can we deliver that kind of hands-on learning experience that so many students come to Roger Williams to gain. And our faculty have really stepped up, including during the spring semester. We have a number of courses that have partnerships built into them. And really the idea is for students to be working with faculty and with community members. And the community members come from all sectors. They come from government, they come from nonprofit, they come from the business sector. And we develop courses that have projects embedded within them so that students are working on teams, for example, consulting with the community partner about the scope of a project, and then delivering over the course of the semester while they're also doing more traditional academic work, coursework. What's interesting is that we've seen how it's possible to move from kind of face-to-face work with community partners to work that's done through the tools that we're all becoming more and more familiar with, Zoom in particular, but also, you know, other project management and communications tools. And it's actually been an important learning experience for us all, but it's one that's very rich in its own right, since so much of the work world, for example, has actually transitioned to doing this kind of work remotely and on these kinds of platforms. Another kind of possibility that we're thinking of is students who are on campus may still be able to have community partnerships. We don't know exactly what the kinds of restrictions on travel and movement off campus might be, but we're working with faculty and community partners to still identify engaged course offerings for the fall semester for students who are on campus. But we're also thinking about students who may, for a variety of reasons, need to be studying from home, and how we could also deliver engaged learning opportunities for those students. They could take the form of the type of class that I was just describing, where the faculty member has worked with a partner to develop a project that students are then collaborating with online. There's another model that we're also developing, which is where a student may establish a relationship or have an academic internship in their home community and be earning academic credit at Roger Williams for the work that they're doing through that internship. That could then be coupled with additional online coursework that they would be doing through more traditional course offerings. But that is a potential response to what we know is some students desire or need to remain at home, but also to have an impact in their local community, which we know many of you, are very concerned about, particularly under current circumstances. All of that is to say, as Allison said, that we're working on a creative suite of options for students that involve multiple modes of delivering courses and teaching and learning.
Thank you. Is the athletic department planning on having a sports season for the athletes?
I'd be glad to take that. I mean, the athletic department is gung-ho to have fall sports. They're all in on that. But I think we need to be patient on this point. And I know it's a difficult one for any prospective student athlete because it could be a key part in your decision making. But as we sit here today, we know that there are no youth sports. There were no high school spring seasons. There's no Little League. So right now, with our current operating conditions with the virus, the answer would be no. But we expect that we will be in a better place come the start of the fall semester. And so we're working with the Commonwealth Coast Conference, of which we're a member as a Division III institution, and staying in touch with the NCAA and attending webinars. And we're trying to come up, we are coming up with a plan to make that possible, provided that the public health conditions and the NCAA support that. And so some examples might be streaming down the travel associated with a typical athletic season, having more in-conference play, which would tend to be more local, testing student athletes at a more frequent rate so that we are able to know exactly, if anybody is positive and to take preventative quarantine and isolation measures. And asking student athletes to live a little bit more restrictive in terms of their interactions both on and off campus. So there is a way to have fall athletics during a pandemic, but we need to strategize very carefully. We have not given up on athletics. It's important to us, it's important to our students, and we want to provide that opportunity.
Thank you.
Just on a related topic, just of the availability, for example, of our fitness center. There are many students at Roger Williams who, even if they're not involved in team sports, are concerned about what access they'll have to the fitness center. And I'm working on one of the teams that's trying to figure out what the protocols are going to be, how we're going to think about hygiene around exercise machines and the appropriate social distancing. But again, and this is just to reiterate that, our commitment, is to enable students to engage when they're on campus and to have, a rich experience that includes all aspects of academic, co-curricular, and extracurricular life. So we're working on that, and we're confident that we'll come up with solutions that are, both enable engagement and that are also safe and healthy.
Thank you. I will actually answer the next question, which is about deferring enrollment. And the question was, if an accepted student decides to defer, can you walk us through that? Do they need to defer for the whole year? And if they defer for one semester, can they defer the next semester? So yes, a student who has committed can then decide to defer their enrollment for either a semester or for a year. But we really would love to have a conversation with any student that's considering that option, because as you've heard so far this evening, we have a number of really interesting options for the fall that we're putting together. So there might be something that is will allow enough flexibility for you depending on what your needs are for the fall. And if you're thinking about taking time off, we're also working on some options for there to be a guided gap year, so you can still be connected with the community, maybe earning a little bit of credit while you're taking the semester off. So we'd love to have a conversation to find out, what your needs are, what your reasons are, and then we can assist you with selecting the option that will work best for you. So please reach out to the admission office, have that conversation, and we'll walk you through the process. But it is an option, to be able to make that enrollment deferral to start a semester. And if you wanted to extend it, it could go for the entire year as well. All right, so now we have some questions kind of related to health services. And the first one is, will the health services staff increase their staffing and or their hours?
Be glad to take that. We are anticipating expanding and making more flexible our hours for health services. We are also expanding space so that we have both regular healthcare space and also dedicated COVID-19 related symptom space, so that those two groups don't share the same space, which helps a lot with the delivery of services. And then we will consider adding staff. We have per diem personnel available to us on an on-call basis as demand needs it, but we have a pretty robust staffing system right now. And we also have some zero pressure rooms in the event that anybody is testing positive and needs to be seen. There's also the option, I saw the option that students will be able to, from the safety of their rooms, undergo a telehealth examination with a nurse practitioner or a nurse in our health center. So we're going to try to take advantage of some of the lessons that we've learned through this crisis in terms of using technology to deliver essential services to reduce the risk for everybody involved. So a counseling session, for instance, because those offices are small and we want to employ social distancing techniques, a counseling session may happen right here on campus, but it may happen via Zoom. But it's a great way to deliver services, and it gives us a lot more opportunities for flexibility.
Okay. Also under health and safety, will Roger Williams have the capability of testing a student for flu and or for COVID-19?
Want to take that one, Brian?
Sure. We are working with a private diagnostic lab right now and working in coordination with the Rhode Island Department of Health for the expectations we have for testing. So testing for COVID-19, I can confirm that the state has the expectation that universities in the state of Rhode Island would be offering clinical and symptomatic testing for COVID-19. So if a student is exhibiting the symptoms and goes for a test, we'll be coordinating that testing definitively happening on campus and working with the state to figure that part out. That clinical testing and working with John's team in health services, that's what would typically fall under a family's healthcare or health insurance plan for being tested on campus, and we'll be able to provide a lot more information about that. But John alluded earlier to the fact of doing some proactive or early warning testing that the university is also exploring at the current time. So testing students who aren't showing a symptom yet, but may be on an athletic team, as John mentioned, or in certain situations where just a random sampling of our population that non-symptom testing is something that the university is also looking at doing in our campus footprint as well. So as much as we can be early preventative, that's the planning that we are looking at from a testing perspective related to COVID-19 specifically, to be monitoring the health and safety of our staff, our faculty, our students. And that's one of the key things that we're looking at for a safe and healthy opening.
Amy, I do want to mention, I do like the question's point of making a correlation between the flu and COVID-19, because we will be pushing flu shots as we do every year. And of course, there's a varying degree of success with flu shots, as we all know in our own families. But it is important that we get a handle on the flu, because to the degree that we can keep the flu under control, should we have another outbreak regionally or nationally, it relieves a lot of stress on our healthcare systems, and it keeps people in better health anyway. So there is a correlation there, and we make free flu shots available to our students every year.
Thank you. There are a couple questions related to masks and whether everyone, all students and employees, faculty will be required to wear masks on campus this semester, and who will supply those masks to the students? Will the parents be responsible for that, or will the school be responsible for that?
Glad to take that. We have already ordered masks for every student, undergrad, graduate, School of Law, every location, Bristol, Providence, and every employee of the university. So we will be providing one mask. It's going to be a Hawk branded mask. But we will suggest, both at orientation and in the move-in instructions, that students bring other masks with them. We will supply cloth masks, which can be washed. We know the frequency of which college students wash clothing. It's an, only desperate, I need my favorite outfit type of washing schedule. So it is very practical to come to campus with extra cloth masks, and we will be encouraging their use. So this is all part of going to college or doing anything in this environment for the next year that we all have to become accustomed to. It's not just Roger Williams. You may have seen that Notre Dame University, Boston College, they've made the same type of commitment. They're letting their prospective students and returning students know social distancing is a proven strategy, and wearing masks is very effective. It's completely foreign for us in the United States, but it is something that we have to wrap our arms around and get used to, because it does make everybody safer.
Thank you. Once a first corona case gets discovered on campus, how do you plan to handle this? Since some first-year students have never lived away from home, this could be very scary for them.
I appreciate that question, because all of the anxiety and the ambiguity related to the COVID-19 situation makes the transition for a first-year student even more complicated than it already would have been. And we're very mindful of that. And our counseling center and our health and wellness educators, who are all students, are going to be working diligently on different both health education campaigns, but also mental health and well-being campaigns. To the core question, if we do find a positive case on campus, we will isolate that student. If the state allows us to have the student go home, and there's not a plane or a train involved, our preference would be, laws allowing, that the student spend their isolation at home where they can receive better care. Obviously, families that have somebody that's immunosuppressed at home, we would, want to keep the student on campus and help the family out. But we will be dedicating both isolation and quarantine space, taking some of our inventory, particularly inventory that has private bathrooms, and where we can provide and deliver food service to students that are going through that. That's how we intend to operate.
And if I can build a little on it, this will share a little bit about we have a testing team, but we also have a contact tracing team. We have an amazing public health faculty who are working with some of our public health students right now to be a support from a faculty, from a staff and health services perspective, but then also a student and a peer perspective for students that can be a peer-to-peer for the students at Roger Williams. So the layers of the planning that anyone needs to do, or guidance for anyone that is working in an office currently or working remotely. If a student is tested positive, there's a layer of support that we need to think of for that student. If a student is near someone who tests positive, there's protocols we will have around that as well for their own monitoring of symptoms to make sure they're safe, or if they need to go and be tested. So that sense of being tested positive and the concerns as a parent, I have 2 college students, and those experiences are anxious for me in different ways. But then also that sense of being near someone who tests positive in the protocols. We will have students who are paid student college work study positions on campus, or internships and public health students earning credit, that are being a student support through the fall semester in case we need that level of support. And we're linking that to the town of Bristol if we can. There's a Bristol Health Equity Zone that works with the surroundings of campus. We're part of a wider community. And this pandemic doesn't just stop at the edges of our campus. So how we think about the campus, how our students interact on and off campus, I think through the course of orientation, which Allison and John are deeply involved with, through the summer and through the fall when students move in and before classes start, what those protocols are going to be and what it means to be a member of a community are things we'll spend a lot of time on, because we have 4,000 people within about 150 acre footprint, and being mindful now when we're all socially distant and we're in our own homes primarily, to be a wider home with a lot more people. Those community standards we're spending a lot of time on, and I think you'll see how those play out through the months ahead about what it means to be a Roger Williams student and to be mindful of those around you. It's a huge learning opportunity and a great experience for us to reopen in a healthy and community-based way.
A little bit of a change of gears. What degree do you earn for civil engineering? Is it a 4 or 5 year program? And do you offer, I believe, a combination engineering and architecture degree?
I can take that one if you'd like. Our engineering degrees are Bachelor of Science, typically 4 years. And we have a number of specializations that students can do within engineering. So a student can opt into civil or mechanical, environmental, electrical, and there's also an opportunity for students to do a custom specialization. So students have a lot of options within engineering. And what was the second part of that, Amy? I think there was a part 2.
Can you do a combination degree with engineering and architecture?
That isn't something that typically we've seen students do in the past, and we would have to talk with you about what you were looking to get out of that dual degree, because sometimes there's ways with graduate degrees and some other certifications that you can kind of work towards gaining degrees without having to do 2 full-on degrees at the same time. So we'd want to have a conversation with you about what your end goal is for your future.
Okay, so if in the case that there is an outbreak of COVID-19 on the campus, what happens, I know, as far as courses and moving towards a hybrid schedule, with the academics for students?
So I think, as Brian mentioned earlier, we're committed to having the technology in the classrooms so that even if we have to divide the class up in half and alter how many people are in there because of social distancing for however long that lasts, that concept lasts, that students really will have no excuse to miss class. So even if they screen themselves and they have a cold and they take our advice and keep themselves out of the mainstream of student life and academic life, they still will be able to capture that academic experience, and their face will be just like tonight, visible on a monitor in the classroom for both the class and the faculty member to engage with. I guess we blame or thank COVID-19 for making us all reachable much more than before.
And what will happen with the dorms in that instance as well? If there's an outbreak on campus?
Well, as Brian said, we will be set up to do tracing and tracing contacts. And, in a worst case scenario, we may have to keep an entire wing in quarantine. We don't expect that to happen. College campuses that had college students on them for the spring, those that couldn't go home, for instance, they didn't have any serious outbreaks at all. So we'll be prepared for that. But if it gets to that situation, then we're talking about a different decision.
Yeah. And I can share a little, I think we're seeing a theme in a lot of the questions here that this is a core area concern. And I just share from our conversations and our weekly calls that John mentioned with the governor's staff in the state of Rhode Island and just other things we see. I think higher education has learned from this pandemic, and states and cities are learning from it as well. I think any place and a lot of the communications right now are, if we face resurgence versus another wide outbreak, or there's a spike up again, what do we do to mitigate that to ensure the whole thing doesn't need to close down again? And whether that's the country, a state, or a campus, we're spending all of our time this summer assessing what those things are. So the earlier statements about doing population testing before someone has symptoms is going to be a very proactive thing that helps us identify something early. If we see a challenge with a given residence hall to mitigate something before it's a campus outbreak, we want to understand a classroom, we want to understand a residence hall. So all of our reopening, Roger, working groups are looking at the emergency planning and the scenarios to keep the campus safe. And I liken some analogies to, if a professor's sick and there's a sign on a door that says this classroom, the professor's not in today, but maybe a class goes online for a day if we're doing a deep clean of a certain residence hall room or a classroom. There's scenarios that we need to spend a lot of time this summer on. And I think, I think orientation this summer and the outcome of a lot of our planning, we'll be able to share in June, July, and August, all of the procedures, from a classroom procedure to the residence hall to the dining hall. So as you may go to the grocery store and you see arrows on the ground, which aisles to go which way, and following those and navigating, our campus navigation and our campus safety is the top priority for us. And we're looking at everything from that flow up to the wider planning we need to do, all to prevent that sense of a wider outbreak from happening.
There's a few questions related to the housing application. Is it still going to be live on June 1st? And how do students find roommates?
Amy, I did survey some of those questions, and right now we still plan to have the housing questionnaire live on June 1st, and we obviously will let students know if that changes. But I want to caution students that it's important that we reframe how roommates are selected, because one of the principles that Brian and I have learned through the governor's office and the Department of Public Health is the strategy of creating what we call stable units or pods of students that take the same classes, live in the same residence hall corridor, have the opportunity to eat together, recreate together. And the public health evidence of that approach is very strong, meaning the fewer contacts in the event of an active virus on a campus or in any other school, by limiting the intercontacts with other students, even though that seems very difficult to conceptualize because we want to have a free and open society. But during a pandemic, we have to make some sacrifices for the greater good. So right now, Allison and I are working with a very comprehensive orientation team, which includes faculty, academic deans, intercultural center, many people in Allison's area, Center for Student Success. And our plan is for first-year students to have that experience of a learning committee, a living learning community, which will most likely be shaped by major. And undeclared exploring students will also have the opportunity, but there'll be some customization so that when it comes to electives, students can let us and Allison and her team and the registrar know what their preferences are for their elective courses, such as a foreign language, for instance, so that it's not completely boilerplate and everybody just has no option. We want, because we're a liberal arts university, we want students to have some choice. But this pandemic forces us to make some quality of life decisions and some public health decisions that change the way that we operate. And so one of those ways is choosing roommates is probably necessarily going to be more limited than it has been in the past. And hopefully for your sophomore year, it'll be wide open. But that is one of the impacts that we want to be transparent about.
Thank you. When will students choose their classes for the fall?
Yeah. So we're determining our academic calendar and some of the options that both Allison and Alan have spoken about. Once that decision is made, and that'll be made fairly quickly within the next 10 days or so, we will then move to how we will group the freshman class in courses. So right now we do not anticipate students selecting classes during orientation, but we anticipate that they will work in groups, small groups, with faculty members after orientation, extending into July. We will assign those courses, and then we will assign rooms. So you can see the domino effect here as we try to create these stable units and pods. It's complicated. It's going to require a tremendous amount of work on the part of the university and a lot of involvement from faculty members, but it will be worth it because, you know, we don't want to go through all of the effort related to reopening Roger to then have to close Roger down. So the more that we do from a preventative and very strategic viewpoint, the more we're able to ensure that we will have a full, successful semester for whatever length that is going to be determined by our academic calendar. Allison, anything you want to add to that?
I would just add that when we talk about having those students in those stable groups, one of the things that I think is going to be a positive of that experience is that it will help with building community among our first year students, which is always important for students, but I think is even more important this year. And the idea of having them work in small groups this summer with faculty advisors, which is typically, honestly, what we do at orientation, will be a way for them to get to interact with some faculty members, get to interact with some students that they may be in classes with, so that we can start that transition process really over the summer. So when I look at orientation for this summer, I almost look at it as kind of a scaffolded kind of approach with us spending time together for June orientation and then having time together throughout the remainder of the summer to focus on classes and some of the planning that will take place for their academics. But I think that community piece will be one of the positives that comes out of this type of approach.
Because you referenced orientation, there are a couple questions about that. We have transitioned our June orientations to be a virtual online experience, but there was a question about whether there'll be something that will be able to get the students together before classes start.
Well, absolutely. That's one of the things that we're talking about in that orientation committee is what are all the different pieces that we want to include over the summer. And we're definitely looking ways to get students together in online platforms, start to gauge their interest in particular opportunities on campus, whether it's academic or co-curricular. So there'll definitely be ways for them to engage throughout the entire summer.
Right, I totally agree with what Allison is explaining. the interaction with orientation advisors is going to be superior than our in-person situations, because it's not just going to be the one particular orientation session that a student registers for. It's going to be throughout the summer with regular engagement opportunities. And we also anticipate that we will have the RAs, resident assistants, for the particular students, the first-year students, reach out in advance to move in. And that's something we've never done before, but we're learning that, you know, this incredible technology can bring us together in different ways and really complement the in-person experience.
When will students be moving in onto campus for the fall, and when will classes begin?
Right now, I think we should proceed as if we're opening on schedule. Now, we are considering, to be honest, and because we need to consider all alternatives, we're considering opening slightly earlier. We are considering opening slightly later. We will make that decision, you know, definitely by July. We'll inform our intent much earlier than that, probably before orientation begins. But we have to, you know, we have to keep in mind that the state of the virus is one of the larger decision makers that we all don't have control over. But what we can promise is that our move-in process will be broken up so that there will be more individualized attention. So instead of everybody moving in one day, the entering class will move in over the course of 3 or 4 dates that will be assigned by, you know, geography and distance and residence hall assignments. So it'll be very intentional and very strategic, and you'll have all that information more than a month in advance.
Okay. Question about the placement test. Will the deadline be extended past June 7th? And if a student is not interested in taking a language, are they required to take the language portion of the test?
Sure. So the placement test date is to encourage students to take the placement exams prior to the start of orientation. But we do keep those open, realizing that there are circumstances sometimes where students need more time for that. But we would definitely want them to have it done by the time we start setting up those individualized meetings with faculty to discuss classes. The foreign language test, we encourage all students to take, even if right now at this very moment they're thinking they don't want to take the foreign language test. We often find that students change their minds. And sometimes when they see how well they do in placement, and get to talk with an advisor about how many credits that might give them towards something, they change their mind about wanting to do the foreign language. So unless there's you know, a particular issue that is really not conducive to you taking that test, we will definitely want you to do that. And if you have any specific concerns about that, for instance, if there's a case where a student is a student with a documented learning disability and has been waived from that requirement, we're happy to talk to you about your options. So just let us know.
There are a number of questions about how tuition might be changed, or the rates might be different depending on some of the models that we discussed at the beginning, and whether or not students are attending courses in person or online. And so if someone can just sort of speak to, you know, how tuition rates may vary with the various different alternatives for the fall.
Yeah, so there, I can answer that a little bit. With our standard tuition, like our tuition right now doesn't really change price based on how the course is delivered. So if you think about a in-person seminar or a lecture hall class or a class with 50 students in it, college tuition tends to be based on the instructor, the cost of the course, and not necessarily how the course is delivered. But having said that, some of these different models that we're thinking about, if it's a student is working or an experiential based, those are things we are looking at and figuring out. The academic models right now are going through a curricular process. Just yesterday, both Allison and Alan on the panels presented some of the models that they've designed to over, I think, 300 faculty and staff across campus to share the ideas that we shared with you earlier on this call to see what other ideas different academic departments have about those models and what they look like. Once they move through that approval process, we have a financial team that is looking at the cost, how those are going to be structured. And we will announce to all of you what the options look like, what the cost is related to those options on our website as soon as we finalize that whole process.
What changes are being made to international programs and study abroad opportunities?
Oh, John, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll start, and Alan may have additional information. But there are a few programs that we hope will continue. Our program in Florence, our program in Bermuda, and our program in Dublin, Ireland. There's a couple that we know that we will be canceling. And so we're very much in a wait and see approach and communicating with those students on a regular basis. Alan, you want to add to that?
I mean, I think, John, you've said the main thing, which is, again, this is a situation where our international programs are at the mercy both of the virus and of government regulations, both U.S. and international, from other countries in terms of restrictions that they're placing on travel, and then the service providers for actual programs in different countries. So we've had a number of cancellations of programs, but still have a few that are open. And of course, we're looking forward to the day soon when we'll open up the full suite of our international study programs again. And actually, I will say we've also been looking at potential alternative sites for study abroad. And so, as a university, we're keenly interested in creating those opportunities for our students. They're going to be somewhat curtailed in the fall, but again, they will open up again.
When should students be giving their IEPs for student support?
I can take that one. Students can visit our website under Student Accessibility Services, and we have a brand new online system that was underway just before the pandemic hit, and now we're really grateful that we have it available for our returning students and our incoming students, and you can actually upload your documents and complete information right through that system. If you'd like to set up some time to talk with somebody over the phone or virtually, we can also do that before you come for orientation or at any point through the summer.
All right, and does anyone know, I don't know if we're gonna be able to answer this, but I don't know if hotels in Rhode Island, Massachusetts are open right now, but does anyone anticipate whether they will be open during move-in time?
I was actually typing an answer to that question. Hotels are taking reservations right now, but whether or not folks from out of state can stay overnight will really depend on the governor's directives in August, and we can't predict what that will be. We are hoping that, as well as the hotel industry, are hoping that that whole section opens up. So reservations are available right now, but they will give you a little bit of a caution in that they're a bit into a wait and see. So that's the status right now. So the expectation is yes.
So if students are taking courses online, will there be access to instructors, and will there be help sessions available?
I can take that one. Absolutely. One of the things that we want to ensure happens regardless of the delivery of a course is that interaction and relationship with faculty members. So that will definitely be in place. Our faculty have spent a lot of time over the course of the last several weeks in the spring semester and now gearing up for the fall and finding unique ways to maintain that connection with students. And all of our faculty offer office hours weekly, and that will be maintained even if classes are a remote or a hybrid version of classes. That will always happen. We also continue to provide tutoring support virtually. We did that this spring semester, and we'll be continuing that for all of our students as an option, because we know that there will be choices that students will be making, or a variety of options that they might be taking advantage of in the fall, and we want to ensure that that will continue. We're also offering virtual appointments with our staff in the tutoring center and student accessibility services, and our advisors and mentors in CSAS. And we mentioned earlier some of the peer leaders that would be connecting with students over the summer. Our peer mentors routinely have contact with the new students over the course of the summer, and they will be doing that as well over the course of the next several weeks. So students will have an opportunity to interact with all of our support services, whether they're physically with us on campus or anywhere else in the world.
How will courses that require labs, such as science labs, be adapted if need be?
I can answer that very briefly with the footnote that I was an English major as an undergrad. I saw a chart today that our biology and chemistry faculty and academic departments have put together, mapping out their lab classes for the fall semester. As you all know, that sense of 6 foot and social distancing between folks is happening right now. And I can tell you that the biology and chemistry faculty are looking at how they can redesign their labs, have lab and working stations, respect social distancing, and make lab classes work. So the idea of a hybrid class in a lab, they're looking at ways to make sure that the lab experience may be rotated and work for all of their classes for our students. It may mean labs are starting earlier in the day, sorry freshmen, or going later into the night, and using the lab for more time to spread out the total number of people at a time. So the phrase that I think you're going to hear a lot from different college campuses and starting to talk here is, how do we de-densify the lab? How do we have fewer people in the lab but maintain the lab experience? And I can assure you that the science faculty are looking at that very carefully right now, and looking at how that can work for all of the labs and all the work that they do. They also are taking care of aquatic creatures and animals and live corals. Through the whole pandemic this spring, our marine access and care for the animals in our marine labs never shuts down. So we had students and/or staff that worked through this entire period, even with the university 99.5% remote working. Those labs were an important part of that experience for the students and for the care of the animals that they're entrusted with. So I think you see very thoughtful biology, chemistry faculty, physics faculty that are really spending a lot of time over the summer to think about what the lab experience can look like. And you may see, you know, lab groups or lab sections of a course, 6 students, 10 students rather than 15, and just really making those work in the schedule to the best of their ability. They're incredibly creative, and the spreadsheet and all the diagrams that they're making is just absolutely incredible to make it work.
Thanks. Will first-year students be allowed on campus anytime this summer?
Well, I can answer that. We just submitted plans to the state of Rhode Island to resume campus tours, and we're waiting to hear back for guidance that that's going to be allowed. Now, I'll footnote that the state of Rhode Island right now has guidance on quarantining and people from out of the state coming into the state. But we are waiting for guidance to start and move through phases like everything is doing this summer, to have Rhode Island residents be able to come in groups of 5 or less or 10 or less, which should be happening very quickly into early June as we move through phases as a state and that group number keeps getting larger. We will let you know and communicate with you as those guidances from the state keep changing. So we're very optimistic within a week or so. Families from Rhode Island could set up a visit and have a personalized campus visit and come through the campus. And then quickly after that, if the state restrictions start to lift, then we will let you know that as well. So as we move, we will move the size of our campus visit and what states and students we can invite to campus and communicate with you through the course of the couple months ahead. So for families that want to see the place, we'd love to have you here. We're all excited to be back on campus more regularly. That's why we have the pictures of campus behind us so that we can be thinking about it as much as we can. So we'll keep you informed on that, but absolutely, as circumstances keep lifting and the economy keeps reopening, we'd love to have you here.
Will students have to be tested for COVID-19 before they come in the fall?
Well, our plan, and Brian can speak a little bit more about that, but our plan is to either test students as they arrive, or, and it's not a choice by the student. We'll either do that, or we'll ask students to come with proof of test within a certain number of days, 7 to 14 days, for instance. And I think Brian explained that that's not our only plan for testing. We plan to either do surveillance testing or interval testing of the population throughout the semester. And there may be special groups, such as athletes and such as our dining employees, who are tested more frequently. But testing and tracing is definitely a part of our reopening plan.
Thank you. There's a number of follow-up questions related to the dorms, the residence halls. Are they going to still be doubles? And about whether there's an option to have a single room as well.
I was able to spy most of those questions, so I'll try to combine answers and save everybody some time. So our plan right now is to have both singles and doubles available. The state has issued us guidance. We do not need to provide everybody single rooms. If we did, that would dramatically decrease our occupancy, and we would not be able to accommodate students that wanted to have residents, both returning and new students. Now, we will not have quads, we will not have triples, even if those rooms are able to hold that because of their space. That is one thing the state has asked us to move away from. There are single rooms available. Those are mostly in Maple Hall. That is certainly something that a student can put a request in. It's important to note that there are a number of single rooms that will be determined by accommodations through Student Accessibility Services in Allison's area, based on documented health and medical needs. I'll also throw in there that we do consider and take very seriously anybody's request for a emotional support animal, and we had plenty of those these past 2 years, so we're becoming more accustomed to that. So nobody should feel shy about making a legitimate request for an emotional support animal. And then there was a question of, do we have enough space to house everybody? And that's a moving target. Certainly, as Allison knows, because she was in student life, we've had situations where we've had as many as 200 extra students that we weren't expecting in the freshman class, and we were able to make that work. We do need to avoid triples, however. So we're doing a couple of different things, such as expanding the commutable distance from 40 to 60 miles. And we will be making an exception this year to our 2-year residency requirement for sophomores. And so if a sophomore is within a commutable distance, we'll be giving them the opportunity to be released from their housing contract. So we're doing everything we can in terms of managing the situation and making sure that we have a space for everybody.
Thank you. There's a few questions related to paying the first tuition bill this summer, and if you pay that bill, but then tuition changes depending on the options that you select for the fall, or if a student is not going to be living on campus for the fall after those payment plans and loans are set up, what would happen? How would that work?
We're all jumping to
Yeah. Do you want it, John?
No.
I'm trying to see the exact wording there. Amy, which question was that?
So there's a few kind of related, if they have to fully commit to loans prior to knowing, their final plan for the fall, how do they know what they're signing up for? And then if a student isn't able to return to the campus, and now they're no longer paying for housing in meal plan, how does that work, those changes?
Okay, so yeah, I was trying to follow an exact one. You kind of did a mashup there. So anything with billing is something that we will work with as circumstances arise. This spring, I think I can just share the experience of this spring to show you that we will work with families. This spring was a whole series of what families paid and then crediting to students' accounts or refunding students' accounts based on circumstances that every individual was working with. So we know in our circumstances this spring, when students left for spring break and then we did not resume campus operations, we ended up refunding room and board for the remainder of semester to students. What students had paid in loans versus what families had committed from their own funds for the semester. Some had paid on payment plans and we had a refund, and then they had money that they had paid on a payment plan that we had to back those out. I think the flexibility of what students set up on a payment plan now, if you start paying for the semester in advance and then the price changes, we would prorate that down. If a student signs up now on a payment plan for 5 3-credit classes and starts a payment plan, but ends up taking 2 science classes that have a lab fee, fees are going to change the other way. If they sign up for double room, but then they're in a single or have a standard meal plan and then go to a higher meal plan, we are constantly making credits and adjustments to student accounts, student loan volumes for families. So it's something that's very individual to a family. And if we are making a wide scale adjustment or prorating credits or room and board of some kind, that's something that students have 24-hour access to a student account in a system called Rogers Central. So they would see all these pluses and minuses on the account, and we will work through that with our financial aid team and our student accounts team. It's a lot of fun.
And I can add just another layer. And I think, one piece of the question was, what if I change my mind about living on campus? And we can assure you that, if a student changes their mind last minute and they don't move in, for instance, even if it's the day that they're supposed to move in, they will receive a full refund of room and board, and we're not going to charge them a cancellation fee or take away their housing deposit. So we'll be flexible in that manner. Should a student get sick within the first 4 weeks of the semester, actually it's longer than that. We have a medical leave policy that prorates refunds in those situations. So we try to be reasonable and flexible in these situations. And we know that this fall, more than ever, that people will be a little bit tentative depending on what the situation is, in August.
Will students be able to take all classes in person if they choose, or will they be required to take some in person and some remote?
Well, I think, and Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the approaches that we're taking is that we actually think that it would be helpful for every college student to take one online course their first semester. And the course that we're focusing on right now is college writing, which is easier to deliver than most other courses. But otherwise, our plan is to have in-person courses. Now, whether or not that means that all 30 students in a particular class are in the classroom at the same time, all depends on the social distancing requirements that are in place as dictated by the state and the public health condition. But at least half the class will be in there one day, and then the other class will be in there the next class. And it would just alternate like that regularly. And everybody else through class capture would be able to, benefit from live stream and still participation. So does that sound right, Allison?
That's right on. The writing in particular has been where we've focused on that one online class because of the experience of the faculty this past spring with being able to deliver that and find ways to still have their conferences with the students to give them feedback. We feel really confident that that is a way to have students have an online class that has a lot of personal attention to it. So that is one of the strategies that we're looking for. But with the pathways that we're trying to create, it's really about students being able to kind of mix and match some of these options to fit together for them. And so we're really looking forward to surveying our incoming students in the near future about some of the things that they are really excited about and where they feel some of their strengths are for classes and things that they're really looking forward to do, so that we can take that into account with our planning for these pathways.
Will students be able to have visitors to on-campus housing spaces?
Now we're getting to the tough questions. So due to the public health situation, we are seriously considering curbing guests, at least for the start of the semester. And we don't know for how long we would have to do that. And there's many, many reasons for that, because, you know, we can't test and get a result on guests when they arrive on campus. That's just not practical. So to take all of these other precautions by testing our students and by having population testing, only to have that thrown out the window by a random, you know, guest that's coming from, let's say, a large, you know, urban institution in the middle of a city with contacts with, you know, tens of thousands of people, seems to really work against all of the hard work and the sacrifices that our students and faculty and staff members will have to put forth. So unfortunately, that is one of the real sacrifices that we may have to make. And I can tell you that every university in Rhode Island is strongly considering or has already decided that they will take that approach, at least for first semester.
Thanks. A couple of questions related to the masks. If you have to wear a mask, how will you eat in the Commons? And also somebody would like to know if you can purchase the Hawk mask.
I'll take the easy question first. So if there is parent interest in purchasing those Hawk masks, we will get extras and we'll make those available somehow, either in our bookstore or another way. Obviously, when people are eating in the dining hall, they won't be required to have their mask on. And it all depends on the situation. So if you're in a pod and you're eating with your roommate, or you're eating with the person that's next door to you, and you're in a very stable health situation where there's no incidence of outbreak or virus positive cases, you'll be able to eat just like regular. But we'll be making some precautions, including separate areas for single dining and separate area for small group dining in the building. And that's part of the reason why students are going to have the flexibility to pick up their food and take it to their room, to provide for all kinds of flexibility. And hopefully, should the virus dissipate to a very, very low level or almost non-existent level for a period of time, we can relax some of those guidelines. So this is a very fluid situation that we will adapt to depending on the public health situation.
Yep. And being on a lot of calls with our state health professionals, I would just add that it's just a reminder that cloth masks are really recommended when circumstances don't allow for 6-foot social distancing. And to John's point, when you're sitting at a table with people who you may live with or in classes with, and in the dining procedures that John is talking about, that group of people, as long as they're 6 feet apart from other groups of people, eating becomes possible. That's how the restaurants in Rhode Island are opening this weekend. So you would wear a surgical mask to a restaurant, but then when you're at a table with your family and the group that you came with, you don't have a mask on necessarily at that point. So those protocols are going to be what are in place now in restaurants in Rhode Island. But over the next couple months, as group sizes change, a lot of these conditions that we're talking about may evolve even more and be precautionary or lessened by the time the fall semester begins. They could change by October 1st as well. So as we're designing a lot of things that are 6 feet or no groups larger than 5 or no groups larger than 10, you'll see it move to 50. You'll see it move to 100. And as those things change, it's going to allow participants or group events on campus. It'll be a semester where the semester just moves this way and opens up to bigger opportunities as we move together, as conditions and guidance from the state changes. We'll just keep adapting from it. And that's what we're going to learn a lot, I think, over the summer and the next few months in and around the communities. And that's going to guide a lot of the things that we do on campus. And it'll be more of an opening versus a clamping down, which we all felt this spring. The fall will be an opening up of opportunities as we move through this together.
There's a few questions related to the fact that with interstate travel right now, there's self-quarantining guidelines in place, and also for students coming into the country who are international, you know, what will that look like for students, and will that impact anything for this fall?
Well, we're monitoring that on a weekly basis, and certainly right now we expect that our international students will have to arrive earlier and self-quarantine, and we're giving that advice through our international students office. In terms of out-of-state students, I think you're going to see that change during the course of the summer, depending on what phase we are in August through the governor's office. Right now, we don't anticipate having to quarantine our out-of-state students. We're operating with that, but you know, we're ready to flip a switch if that becomes the case. But that's not the sense that we're getting on our weekly call with the governor's office right now.
Thank you. A question specific to marine biology. We have the research vessel, you know, and students are typically out on that doing hands-on learning. So if a student is not on campus, will still be able to take advantage of that in a different semester? Is there flexibility around marine biology courses where the research vessel is utilized?
I don't know off the top of my head how often that particular course is offered, but if you want to send me your email in the chat function, I will get an answer back to you on that.
Yep.
There's a few people who ask clarifying questions about the whole choosing a roommate situation, and if they've already chosen a roommate, but there are different majors, will they still be able to room together? And will we be just assigning people together to be roommates? And how will we kind of put people together based on any sort of similarities?
Can you repeat that, Amy? I was answering a question. Sorry.
So for roommate assignments, if somebody already had chosen a roommate, but they're different majors, will they still be able to room together? And how will Roger Williams be doing those assignments to place roommates together for this fall?
So if they already had a roommate in mind, of course, our housing applications are not live yet, so there's actually no official housing application. But if they're not in the stable group that we create because they're not going to be able to take classes in common, it's most likely that at this point in time, we're not going to be able to have them live together. It's possible that they could live together second semester, depending on the public health situation. And obviously, we're extremely hopeful that everything will be back to normal for sophomore year and they can choose their roommate. But I want to be transparent that we are really committed to taking a public health approach, and that some sacrifices are going to be necessary. And I hope people understand that.
Will parents have to get tested to help students with their move-in?
Saw that question? No, that will not be the case. Just like with our current move-out strategy for students that went home over spring break and then returned to get their belongings. We'll just have precautions and procedures in place, mask wearing. I think we should anticipate that only one family member will actually be able to go into the building. Remaining family members can, stay in the car to say a final goodbye. And we will spread those move-ins out so that there'll be less opportunities for interaction with other families coming from other distances.
Just since we're wrapping up the last few minutes, I'm just scanning the rest of the questions to see if there's anything that we didn't address. And what we'll do is we'll look through these questions afterwards and follow up with folks individually if there's something that we weren't able to get to. But it looks like we've covered most of this so far this evening. So why don't we go ahead and wrap up with just some final thoughts, and then I'll make sure that any questions that weren't answered, that there's follow-up that happens. So if anyone has any parting words of wisdom for the group, we can please go ahead.
Mine are, with the questions that you've asked, you are going to be an amazing group of students and parents for us to work with through the year ahead. Sessions like this we have done through the spring. And open sessions like this with our president, with academic deans, with how we're going to design orientation until we can do things in person. I really want to thank you for the questions you've asked, and hope we're showing you a sense of what you're getting when you work with Roger Williams. We will have sessions like this related to billing, financial aid, going more in depth. The sessions with academic advisors and talking about your majors and what the curriculum is going to look like, and those questions about the biology and the labs and the vessel. There are people much more close to that experience than us that can get on a session like this with you and really talk about all those answers you're going to have through this whole journey for the next 4 years with us. So I just want to say thank you. These are great questions. We hope these are answers that there are places where we're confident we can say this is what we're doing, and there's places where it's like this is still in progress. We're going to learn through this together, and it's going to be great having you along for this journey. So thanks for taking the time and hanging on for an hour and a half with us.
And I would add, Amy, that I hope people understand and appreciate that we're being transparent. We're not trying to sugarcoat anything. We realize that this is a very stressful time, but it's also a time with tremendous opportunity for growth. As a former psychology and major and a counseling degree holder, dissonance just provides incredible opportunities for growth and for stretching ourselves. And I really believe that, a student that goes through their first year in this pandemic public health situation, with so many unknowns, is going to be better prepared for what life has in store than any student that's graduated in the last 10 years. So while it is, dispiriting in some ways, there is some silver lining here. And we really want to recognize that you are going to college in a unique, unprecedented time, and that we're going to respond in unique ways. And as Brian said, we're going to continue to adapt. And hopefully the protocols that we're talking about will be relaxed. So we're giving you the worst case scenario, and hopefully from there we can relax as the semester and the academic year goes on. But we want to be honest and prepare students for what college life will be like.
We've come to the end of our time, but I want to echo my colleagues' comments and welcome everyone, and also invite you to reach out to me directly if you have any questions, particularly about hands-on learning experiences and community engagement at Roger Williams.
And I would just add that one of the things that I think that makes Roger Williams a special place is the care for our students. And at no other time in my 19 years have I been more proud of the efforts of the institution to really take into account where our students are, what their needs are and to find ways to respond to that during such a challenging time. So I would also invite you to reach out if you have specific questions or want to talk to someone in greater detail about anything that was discussed tonight, but in particular, those of us in the academic area can help with imagining what it might be looking like for you for next semester for your courses. We'd be happy to talk with you at any time over the summer.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all my wonderful colleagues for helping out with all these answers, and we look forward to seeing everyone on campus very soon. Take care.
Thanks, Amy.
Hey, go Hawks!